On today's podcast, we are continuing a three-part series that's focused on the characteristics of servant leadership. And we've put it into three different categories. We talked about awareness and the characteristics around servant leadership and how we define this term and how important awareness is. Last episode, we talked about vision. And today, we're going to talk about impact, how the spirit of stewardship, commitment to the growth of others, and building community is essential to being servant leaders and creating these kind of cultures in the world. Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everyone, it's Jason and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. I am so excited to be with you today, wherever you are, however you're coming to the podcast today. Welcome, glad you're here, glad we're, diving into this together. If you're somebody who's been with us from the very beginning of the podcast, welcome back. Continue to hear great things about the contributions that the podcast is making to people, and thanks for the feedback that I receive for people that the topics, the conversations, everything is meaning something to them in their own individual journey, but also into the conversations they're carrying forward into their team. So glad for all of you that have been with us from the very beginning. Also, anybody new to the podcast, welcome. So glad you're here and so glad that excitement and growth continues to happen with the podcast. I hope you dive in. Hope you also take the time to go back and check out past episodes. A lot of great stuff in there, great conversations, thought leaders from around the world, and also micro pods that I think you will enjoy the different topics and add value to your life and work. My promise to you, as always, is that this will be a space in your day, in your week, in your practice. Hopefully it's building good habits for you individually, giving you some positive things, some healthy things, some good things to think about, to step back, to have some time and space to then think about your own life, your own team that you're leading, the culture that you're trying to create with the people around you. So thank you and glad you're here. As always, I hate that I have to ask this, but if you are willing to rate this podcast, 5 stars, of course, leave a nice review. Those are the ways in which these messages help get amplified to other people. That's how the algorithms work. That's how more and more people can find the podcast. So every time you do that, that really helps. So I appreciate it more than you know. Anybody that takes the time to rate the podcast, review the podcast, subscribe, of course, if you haven't already done that, and then share it with the people in your network, whether that's on social media or inviting people on your team or throughout your organization to be a part of this conversation, topics that you think will resonate with them. Every time you do that, it spreads. So thank you. We've been talking about in the last stretch of podcasts about the realities of the workforce, the workplace that we're in today. So much has happened. Of course, the great resignation with people moving, leaving jobs, looking for new jobs, remote work, hybrid work, all of these different topics. We also know that the research that is evolving right now that is telling us, as they're studying these people that have up and quit jobs, 30 plus million people and growing that have just quit their jobs. What is it they're looking for? Where are they going? What is it that they want out of their job and out of their life and their work? And really, the research continues to just glaringly come back to us and say what people are looking for are meaningful cultures. They want to be a part of teams, companies, organizations that they feel like the mission is bigger than them, that they feel like they are honored as a human being, cared for, and they are in an environment that's helping them contribute their gifts, their strengths, again, to contribute to a growing of a mission or a culture that's bigger than themselves. It doesn't have to be perfect. No organization, no team is, but that's what the research is telling us. And also we know from the research is that not only is this just what people want, and is this a smart strategy, but the reality is the metrics follow as well. So Gallup tells us through all their research that higher levels of engagement, employees and team members that have a higher level of engagement with their minds and hearts, also leads to better outcomes. So the metrics improve, higher productivity, more likely to hit targets, more likely to build relationships and with team members and customers, create loyal things. These kind of organizations that have engaged employees are more likely to retain people, attract people. All of those metrics, productivity goes up. So there's an ROI to all of this stuff too. So we're diving in, and we can continue to want this podcast to be a place where people that are thinking this way are looking for developing this kind of thinking and this kind of leadership and cultures in the world, that this is a resource for them. We know in our own minds that if that's what we know people want and need in the world, we know in our own minds that leadership, because most people, again, you don't leave jobs, they leave leaders, they leave managers, they leave bosses that aren't creating those kind of cultures. So we know that in our own minds that leadership and the compelling kind, the influential kind, the inspiring kind, the caring form of leadership that we often refer to as servant leadership is key to engaging people. It is engaging their minds and hearts in serving a mission and the needs of people and an organizational mission that's greater than ourselves. So on today's podcast, we are continuing a three-part series that's focused on the characteristics of servant leadership. And we've put it into three different categories. We talked about awareness and the characteristics around servant leadership and how we define this term and how important awareness is. Last episode, we talked about vision and the characteristics of servant leadership that, again, help us define this and how important vision is. And today we're going to talk about impact, how the spirit of stewardship, commitment to the growth of others, and building community is essential to being servant leaders and creating these kind of cultures in the world. So let's take a break. We'll pause for a second, and we'll be right back. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually, with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. So from the beginning of this three-part series around servant leadership, we've been making sure that we are defining servant leadership. It's, again, a term that gets thrown around very loosely in the world, or that people talk about and some, really excited about, but we wanted to make sure that we're defining the term. And so I've been sharing with you on this three-part series, which once again, if you haven't listened to those other two about awareness and about vision, then I encourage you to go back and listen to those. Again, not that you can't listen to these in whatever order you want, but all of them create a fuller picture of what this term servant leadership and more importantly, the actions and characteristics that servant leaders show in the world. I've been sharing that, where did this term come from? Robert K. Greenleaf he's the one who gets credited for coining the term servant leadership back in the 60s. His essay, Essentials of Servant Leadership, introduced the ideas that resonated with so many people around the world. It also inspired the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership, whose whole focus is to study, teach, and celebrate the philosophies around servant leadership. Other context, in 1998, Larry Spears, who was the executive director of the Center for Servant Leadership, the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership, he established these kind of 10 characteristics of servant leadership that was based on their framework and years of research. Like, here are 10 characteristics so that we can better understand this term servant leadership and what it looks like, most importantly, in action and behavior. So, I'll just say this also. I continue to say this on each of these. Many have different feelings about the term itself, servant leadership. Again, some people love it and love this kind of term. Others, the terminology isn't perfect for them, which I understand. And wherever you will fall on the terminology, what term you like the best. I don't want to get hung up on that in this series. I want to make sure that let's not get hung up on the complexities of that term, but let's focus more on the spirit of the term, the idea, the concept around what has become known as servant leadership. And let's focus on, again, the spirit and the concepts and the characteristics that most people agree upon. That's the focus of this. So in this podcast series, again, I've been breaking down these 10 characteristics into these 3 core elements of servant leadership that I see at play. The categories have been around awareness and the characteristics of servant leadership around awareness and that foundation to being a servant leader. Then we've also, last episode, we talked about vision and the kind of conceptualization and foresight and persuasion that comes with having vision for a future that we're trying to create together. And then today we're going to talk about impact. Impact again. So in each of these episodes, we started out by letting us know that servant leadership begins with our ability or inability to be aware of. That's why our awareness came in episode 1 about our own thinking, feeling, and experiences. That's really the heart of emotional intelligence. And so servant leadership has this kind of, our servant leaders are highly emotionally intelligent, which means they understand, they're aware of their own thinking, feeling, and experiences of themselves and also of the people around them, but also have a deep commitment to inner strength and developing that kind of inner strength, but also a development around listening, around empathy, around healing and recognizing none of us are perfect, no group of people are perfect, and so we need time to heal and grow, but also vision, conceptualization, being able to have a concept of a future that we want to be a part of creating, the kind of foresight which helps us be able to see where the path we've walked in the past, the current realities and obstacles we might be facing and opportunities that are in front of us, and then what is the foresight to be able to say, where is it we're trying to go next and how do we move? And then also persuasion. And again, that this type of leadership isn't about command and control and coercing people to do something, but it is about persuading people and inviting people into dialogue around a compelling mission, a compelling purpose, a mission greater than self. So it's not about command and control, but it's about, bringing people into engaging their mind and heart in this kind of compelling mission, purpose, vision of the future. So today we're going to focus on that last category that I'm calling impact, related to these 10 characteristics of servant leaders. Servant leaders begin with a spirit that they are stewards. So part of impact is that they begin with a spirit that they are stewards for a greater good in society. Every servant leader that I've been around, that I've studied, or that I, recognize this kind of authenticity with their kind of leadership style, that oftentimes at the heart of it is this spirit and this belief that they are stewards for a greater good in society, that they want to be a part of creating impact and having their contributions are a part of something of the greater good for society. They recognize that their actions and their efforts, and yes, their impact, the results of their actions and efforts, will hopefully outlast the here and now. That they come to their role as a leader of realizing that they want to be a part of a bigger impact in the world, and that they want to be a steward for greater good in society, that they're lucky to have been privileged to be, for the people that have come before them, the lessons they've learned, the things that others have, taught them, the people who committed to their own growth, and they recognize then that their actions and efforts and impact will hopefully outlast them, outlast the here and now. So they enter their role as a leader with a mindset of stewardship for preserving the best of the past and serving those into the future. So when you think about, Jim Collins and his great work with Good to Great and his book Built to Last, he talks about the kind of yin and the yang of leadership, of preserving the core on one side, the yin, and the yang is stimulating progress for the future. Really, a servant leader comes with this mindset of stewardship, of wanting to preserve the very core, the very best of the past, and at the very same time, stimulating progress, serving something about the future that we're trying to create together. And that's really the mindset of a servant leader, is around this idea of stewardship. Servant leaders see that their role as a leader is also to be committed to the growth of other people. They recognize that many people committed to their growth and helped them grow and develop and get to the place where they are. And that their role as leader, again, isn't just to be at the top and bark out orders and tell people what to do, but to be at the bottom and to commit to the growth of those around them, help identify the talents and the gifts of the people around them, but also commit to their growth. These kind of servant leaders they're traditionally, these are people that are great listeners. If you're trying to, in your head, imagine the people that fall into this kind of category, they're traditionally great listeners. They have an ability to empathize with other people. They're able to see the gifts and talents of others. And oftentimes you hear people say, man, they saw something in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself. And then they are committed to helping to be a coach, a guide, and a mentor to help those around them grow and blossom. At the core of servant leadership is a commitment to other people's growth, wanting other people to succeed. Servant leaders also see their role as a leader in building community. And so they think about their team, the people around them, that it's not just about just the results of what the team produces, but it's about building a community and a process and of how they get to those results, and building a community of people of not just what they do, but how they do it. They recognize that people want to belong to something. People want to participate. People don't just want orders being handed down from above in like tasks to just do in isolation. They recognize that people want to belong to something. They want to participate. They want to be collaborators with others for the greater good. And servant leaders see the power that comes from aligning a community of people. They see that there's power in aligning a community of people together to accomplish something they couldn't accomplish on their own. Servant leaders also see their role as a leader is to build community. They recognize that people want to belong to something. They want to participate. They want to be collaborators with others for the greater good. And so they recognize that people, again, they don't just want command and control. They don't just want somebody to bark out orders and tell them what to do, that they actually want, and they don't want to work in isolation, purely in isolation. They want to belong to something. They want to participate in the creation of a culture and a goal that's greater than themselves. They want to be collaborators with others for the greater good. So servant leaders see the power that comes from aligning a community of people together to accomplish something they couldn't accomplish on their own. They see their leadership style and actions as collaborators of community, that their role as a leader, again, is not just to get outcomes and just results, although, again, hear me say this very clearly, results and outcomes are absolutely critical. But they see that it's not just about outcomes and results. It's about the process and the community and the culture they build along the way that produces those kind of results and outcomes. And so their leadership style and actions are collaborators of community. They see their role as a leader is to help people. The how they get to those results is as important as everything. Building cultures that others want to be a part of and that also are cultures that help people grow. Servant leadership is not soft by any means. I've been saying that and reminding us of this on each of these episodes. It's not soft. Again, we can sometimes get tricked into thinking that servant leadership is just about being nice or kind, or that, and it really comes off as kind of soft or avoidant. in a lot of ways. And that's truly not the definition of servant leadership. Some of the strongest, healthiest, best servant leaders I've ever been around or studied or observed are not soft by any means. In fact, it oftentimes requires even more courage and patience. And so it's with intention and begins with an internal spirit and external desire to serve a mission greater than self, and then the courage to be able to enter into tough dialogue and to bring that community together to say, all right, we're not going to be soft in this moment. We're going to have grit and resilience. And there are obstacles and challenges we might be facing, but let's get our minds back on that North Star, that purpose of why we exist and how we're committed to working together. And now let's move things forward. And so it's not soft by any means. It requires great courage and great patience. And so I've been talking about, again, on these last 3 episodes, these kind of 3 categories that I've put together based on these 10 characteristics of servant leadership. So we've been talking about these categories of awareness, vision, and then, of course, today, this idea of impact. And that impact, we want to be stewards of something greater than ourselves. We want to commit to the growth of other people. And obviously, we want to have outcomes. We want to have an impact with the people and the projects and the things that we're doing that are going to live beyond us, beyond the here and now. And so, as always, I want to leave you with some questions to ponder this week. How do you see your role as a steward for your life, for your role, for your work? How do you see your role as a steward? What stewardship is needed in your life and work? Whose growth are you committed to? And who are you actively trying to help develop? Whose growth are you committed to? And who are you actively trying to help develop? What are you going to do over the next week, the next month, the next year to build community with those on the mission with you? Again, part of our role as a leader is to strategically and intentionally help build that community. So what are you going to do over the next week, month, or year to build that kind of community, that kind of spirit of collaboration and connecting and aligning your people around that future that you're trying to create together? Remember, calibrating our own personal thermostat begins with us intentionally and based on our own awareness, what behavior response we put out into the world, how we see and are aware of the people around us, and then calibrating our response. We are the thermostats. Our own internal temperature sets a temperature externally for others based on our own response and our own behaviors. So I hope you've enjoyed this 3-part episode, on servant leadership. I hope it's given you a little broader definition of some of the characteristics around servant leadership and helped you connect then again to these categories around bringing servant leadership to life through awareness, through, vision of the future, and through impact. On the next upcoming episodes, I'm excited. On the very next one, we're gonna share about the launch of my new book that's coming out August 2nd. It's called Breathing Oxygen: How Positive Leadership Gives Life to Winning Cultures. Excited to share more about that and all that's happening, and really hope that you all will be a part of that successful launch and sharing of these new messages in the world. So more to come on that. But remember, the best leaders, teams, and cultures on the planet stimulate progress by calibrating their own personal thermostat as a leader and then aligning the people around them to set the temperature for the culture that you're trying to create together. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.